The Queen's fury. The throne room of the alien empire shook with a roar that seemed to split the walls. The alien queen stood in the center, her golden eyes burning with rage, her long armored cloak dragging across the polished stone floor. Every noble, every soldier, and every servant in the hall froze. None dared to even breathe too loud. Her armor stood at the side of her throne, gleaming brighter than anyone had ever seen it. The armor was sacred. It was said to be forged from the heart of a dead star, passed down through generations of her royal bloodline. For years it had been damaged in battle, cracked in ways no smith, no scientist, and no engineer of her empire could repair. They had tried again and again, and they had failed, but now, overnight, the armor stood whole, restored, and shining as if newly born from fire. The Queen's voice thundered, echoing across the marble walls, "Who touched my armor?" The crowd trembled. Alien nobles bent their heads low. Warriors shifted nervously. Priests whispered prayers under their breath. No one moved, no one spoke. Her claws tapped against her scepter as she paced slowly, her voice sharp like a blade. "This armor is mine. Forged in the blood of my ancestors, it is forbidden for any hand to touch it, forbidden for any tool to strike it, forbidden for any mind to change it, yet—" Her hand swept toward the gleaming armor. Here it stands, restored, stronger than before. Her fury was not only about the broken rule, it was about the mystery. If her own people had failed to fix it, then who had dared? Who had succeeded where the greatest minds of the empire had fallen short? Whispers slithered through the hall. Perhaps it was divine intervention. No, this is dangerous. If someone can fix her armor, what else can they do? Maybe it was sabotage? The Queen's tail lashed behind her like a whip, silencing the whispers with a single glare. She turned to her guards, her voice low but more terrifying than her scream. "Find them. Bring them. Now." The guards scattered. The heavy doors groaned open as they stormed into the palace halls. Searching every corner, the Queen stood still, her gaze sweeping across the throne room again, and her eyes narrowed on the crowd. Somewhere among the frightened faces, she felt it. Someone was hiding the truth. In the back of the hall, one figure stood stiff and quiet. Not alien, not royal, not warrior, but human. A simple engineer brought from a faraway world, his clothing plain, his tools worn, his hands scarred from labor, his heart pounded, but he did not lower his gaze. Where others trembled, he stood still. The Queen's sharp eyes caught the smallest flicker of defiance. She tilted her head slightly like a predator sensing prey. Her voice cut the silence. "You human," the hall gasped. Nobles stepped back. Soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. The human did not move. He knew the weight of those eyes on him. He knew one wrong word could mean death. The Queen's steps echoed, slow, heavy, deliberate. Each strike of her clawed feet on the stone made the silence deeper. She stopped before him, towering over his smaller frame. "Tell me, fragile one, was it you who touched what none dared to touch? Was it you who repaired the armor of the Queen?" The air grew thick. Everyone leaned forward in fear and fascination. If he lied, she would know. If he admitted, he might die. The human took a breath, steady and calm, and though the hall waited for his silence, his denial, his plea for mercy, he raised his chin and spoke. Yes, a storm broke out in the hall. Nobles screamed in outrage, priests wailed in horror, warriors shouted for his execution, but the Queen lifted one hand, and silence crushed the noise instantly. Her eyes blazed brighter than fire, but hidden deep in that fire was something else. Curiosity. She leaned close, her voice like thunder whispered, "Then you are either a fool or the bravest creature in this galaxy." The human's heart raced, but his voice remained calm. "I am an engineer. I fix what is broken." The Queen studied him long and hard. The hall felt like the edge of a blade waiting to cut. Her lips curled into a smile that was both dangerous and strange. "Very well, human. Let us see if your courage is as strong as your craft." And with that, the throne room erupted into whispers again. The first chapter of something dangerous, something unstoppable, had begun. The human steps forward. The hall still trembled with whispers, but all eyes stayed locked on the human. He had admitted it without fear, without hesitation, and that truth alone felt heavier than 1,000 weapons. Alien nobles hissed insults. Warriors pounded their spears on the ground. Priests muttered curses against him, but the human did not flinch. He stood in the circle of their hatred alone, small compared to their towering forms, yet unshaken. It was as if the weight of their fury only sharpened the fire in his eyes. The Queen circled him slowly, her cloak dragging across the marble floor. Her claws scraped against her scepter, sparks dancing in the air. "You admit it so easily," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "Do you understand what you have done? You touched what no alien dared, you changed what was sacred." The nobles shouted in agreement. "Execute him now. Make an example of this fragile creature. He defiled the Queen's legacy." The Queen silenced them with one sharp glance, her golden eyes narrowing. She turned back to the human. "Tell me, how did you succeed where the greatest of my kind failed?" The human's voice was calm, steady. "I studied the fractures. I learned the flow of its metal, the stress in its bones. I reforged it, I reshaped it, and I strengthened it, not with your tools, but with my own understanding." He lifted his scarred hand slightly, his fingers still blackened from the labor. "Your people forged it with pride, but I fixed it with necessity. Where you saw something holy, I saw something broken that needed to be made whole again." The hall erupted again in disbelief. Their pride stung deeper than any wound. How dare a human claim greater knowledge than the finest smiths of the Empire? One of the alien warlords stepped forward, his body covered in scaled armor, his voice booming like thunder. "Lies! This fragile creature cannot outshine us. I demand proof!" He drew his massive blade, forged of the same star metal, and slammed it down against the Queen's restored armor. The sound cracked across the hall like lightning. The armor did not break. It did not even scratch. Instead, the blade itself shivered, and a tiny fracture split along its edge. Gasps filled the room. Priests fell to their knees. Warriors stared in shock. Nobles' faces twisted in disbelief. The impossible stood before them. One human had reforged what no empire could. The Queen's expression changed, no longer only rage, but something sharper, heavier, curiosity mixed with fear, respect tangled with danger. She leaned closer, her voice lower but stronger. "Why? Why would you do this? To touch my armor was death. To succeed was worse. Did you not fear what would happen to you?" The human's eyes met hers, unshaken. "I knew the risk, but fear has never fixed anything. My kind believes when something is broken, we repair it. That is who we are. That is who I am." The nobles jeered louder, unable to accept his words. "Arrogance! Kill him now before he poisons the Empire with his madness. Humans are weak, they are nothing." But the Queen raised her hand again, silencing them all. She stared at the human for a long moment, her gaze burning into his soul. Finally, she whispered in a voice that still carried across the room, "Perhaps weakness is not what I see." The tension in the throne room grew heavier. No one could predict what would happen next. The Queen turned to her council, her voice sharp and commanding. "This human speaks of skill. Then let him prove it again. I will not judge him on words but on deeds." She pointed her scepter at him. "In the docks of my empire lies a warship engine, broken for decades. My greatest minds failed to breathe life into it. If you succeed, I will know your worth. If you fail—" Her eyes glowed with fire. "Your bones will feed my hounds," the hall gasped. Some laughed cruelly, some whispered in awe. The human only nodded once without fear. "Then I will fix it," he said simply. His voice was quiet compared to the Queen's thunder, but in that quiet was something terrifying, something unyielding, something that made even the proudest alien warriors shift uneasily. The Queen leaned back into her throne, her lips curling into a strange smile. "Very well, human. Let the galaxy watch. Either you will rise, or you will burn." And with that command, the hall exploded into chaos. Warriors preparing, nobles whispering, priests chanting. The human stood in the storm of their hatred and fear, alone yet unbroken for the first time. The Empire had seen it clearly. This was no fragile creature. This was a human, and he had just declared war on their doubts. The Queen's fury had found its answer. But what came next would test not only his skill, but his very survival. The threat and the truth. The Queen's challenge echoed through the Empire. Word spread like fire in dry grass. A human, weak, fragile, unworthy, had been ordered to repair the Queen's dead warship engine. The same engine her finest engineers, her most skilled builders, and her wisest priests of metal had failed to restore. Some laughed at the idea. Others sharpened their knives, waiting to watch his failure. But in the shadows, there were whispers of fear. If he could fix the Queen's armor, what else could he fix? What else could humans do? The human was taken from the throne room, escorted by guards with blades at his back. Yet he walked calmly, his footsteps steady against the cold steel floors of the palace. He carried no fear in his face, only thought, only calculation. It unsettled the soldiers more than if he had begged for his life. In the massive docking bay, the broken warship towered above all, its black hull scarred, its engines silent for decades, its heart long dead. The priests of the Empire had declared it cursed. The engineers had declared it hopeless, but now, one man was told to fix it or die trying. The nobles gathered above on balconies, eager for blood. The queen sat high upon a raised throne, her eyes locked only on him. The air was thick with anticipation. Every soul waited for him to break. The human placed his hands on the cold metal of the engine. He felt its silence, its pain, its forgotten power, and he whispered to himself, "Broken things can always be fixed," the alien priest scoffed. The warlords laughed, but the queen leaned forward, her golden eyes unblinking. Hours turned into days. The human worked without pause, his hands blistered, his body weakened. He crawled inside the dark chambers of the engine, mapping its flaws, studying its forgotten design. Alien engineers had used rituals, chants, sacred patterns that bound them in chains of tradition. But the human ignored those rituals. He tore away what did not matter, and he built with logic, with science, with fire in his veins. Yet the more he worked, the more enemies gathered. Alien nobles conspired in the shadows. "If he succeeds, he makes us look weak." "We cannot allow this," one whispered. "Better to end him before the queen grows too curious." They planned to sabotage him, to end his work before he could finish one night. While the human worked deep inside the engine, shadows crept behind him. An assassin, cloaked in darkness, raised a blade. The strike came fast, but the human turned in time. The knife scraped across his shoulder. Blood spilled, but his eyes burned brighter. He grabbed a wrench, struck back with all his strength, and the assassin fell. The guards rushed in, finding the human bloodied but alive. The body of the assassin at his feet, gasps filled the bay. This fragile creature had survived what should have killed him. When the queen was told, her fury was volcanic. Her tail slammed against the floor as she roared, "Who dares touch what is mine?" Her golden eyes scanned the trembling nobles, and though none confessed, many felt her wrath cut through them. But when she looked back to the human, wounded yet still working, she saw something no one else dared to admit. This man was not breaking. He was rising at last after endless days. The warship engine roared to life. The docks shook with its power, fire and light exploding from its core. The nobles fell into silence. The priests dropped their holy books. The impossible had been done. The queen rose to her feet, her towering form glowing in the firelight. She descended the stairs, each step a thunderclap. The hall of nobles bowed their heads in fear, but her eyes fixed only on the human. She stopped before him, his hands still blackened with grease, his blood still staining his shirt. Her voice was low, dangerous, but filled with something new. "You should be dead. You should be broken. Yet here you stand. Why?" The human's answer was simple, but it struck harder than any weapon. "Because breaking is easy. Standing is harder. And humans always stand." The throne room fell silent. The nobles were speechless, the priests afraid, the warriors unsettled. And for the first time in her reign, the queen felt her anger clash with respect. She leaned closer, her words sharp as a blade. "You are fragile in flesh, but unbreakable in spirit. That makes you dangerous." The hall erupted again in chaos, voices shouting for his death, voices trembling in fear of his survival. But deep inside, the queen already knew. This human had changed everything, and no matter what choice she made next, the galaxy would never be the same. The test of loyalty. The warship engine roared like a beast reborn. Its light flooded the docks. Its fire shook the steel beneath their feet. The impossible had been done, and only one man had made it possible. A human, standing alone against an empire, but victory brought no peace. The Queen's Council whispered in shadows, their pride torn apart. If he can fix her armor, if he can fix her warship, what will stop him from fixing her throne? Another hissed, "He makes us look weak before the galaxy. This human cannot be allowed to live." The Queen heard their voices. Though they tried to hide, her golden eyes missed nothing. But she said nothing, waiting, watching, weighing her next move. The human, his body still aching, his wounds still fresh, stood before the throne once again. The nobles demanded his death. their voices rising like thunder. Execute him. Throw him into the void. He is a threat to the order of the Empire. But the queen raised her hand and silence fell like a blade. She stared at the human, her expression unreadable. You have done what none of my kind could. You have touched what was sacred, and you have succeeded. Her voice grew sharper. But skill is nothing without loyalty. Tell me, human, where does your loyalty lie? The hall froze. This was the question that would decide his fate. If he said the wrong word, death would come instantly. If he lied, she would know. The human lifted his eyes, steady and unafraid. My loyalty is to what is broken, to what can be made whole again. My loyalty is to truth. Gasps rippled through the hall. The nobles roared in outrage. He defies you, my queen. He spits on your crown. The queen's tail slammed against the marble floor, silencing them again, but inside her chest, something stirred. Something she had not felt in centuries. Respect still, she was not ready to trust him. Words, she said coldly, are easy. Loyalty must be proven. Her command struck the hall like lightning. Bring the prisoner. 2 guards dragged in a chained alien soldier, bloodied and beaten. A traitor who had betrayed the Empire. The queen's voice was sharp. This creature conspired with rebels. I will give you a choice, human. Kill him and prove your loyalty to me. Spare him and prove your loyalty to weakness. Choose carefully. Your life depends on it. The hall held its breath. The human looked at the prisoner. Broken, trembling, barely alive, he looked at the queen, her eyes testing, daring him to decide. The human's heart pounded, but his voice was steady. If you ask me to kill, then you do not understand what makes me human. We do not prove loyalty with blood. We prove it with courage. The queen's eyes narrowed, the hall exploded in fury. He defies you again. He refuses your command. But the human did not stop. You asked where my loyalty lies. It lies with what can be repaired, not destroyed. You call this one broken, but I see something that can still be fixed. If you wish for me to lie, I will not. If you wish for me to kill, I cannot. My loyalty is not to power. It is to hope. The throne room shook with voices of rage. Nobles demanding his execution. Priests cursing his name. Warriors raising their weapons. But the queen sat in silence, her eyes burning into his soul. Slowly, dangerously, her lips curved into something between a snarl and a smile. You are either the greatest fool in this galaxy, or the only one who has ever dared to speak truth before me. The queen rose to her full height, towering, her golden cloak spilling across the floor like liquid fire. She raised her scepter, and for a moment, everyone thought she would strike him down. The human did not move, did not beg, did not bow. The silence was thick enough to choke. Then the queen lowered her weapon, her voice a roar that shook the walls. This human is mine. His life is mine. His truth is mine. From this day forward, none shall touch him without my command. The nobles gasped. Warriors froze. Priests trembled. The queen had not executed him. She had claimed him. But in the shadows, whispers of rebellion grew louder. This human had done more than fix armor and engines. He had broken the pride of an empire. And while the queen saw him as proof of strength, others saw him as a dangerous spark, a spark that could set the galaxy on fire. The queen's choice. The throne room was no longer silent. Whispers spread like venom. Voices grew sharp like blades. The queen had spared the human. No, worse, she had claimed him. And for the first time in centuries, the empire felt divided. The nobles whispered of rebellion. The priests whispered of blasphemy. The generals whispered of war. But the human stood calm at the queen's side. His hands scarred, his clothes torn, his eyes unbroken. Every alien who looked at him saw something they could not explain. Something fragile, yet unyielding. Something weak in body, yet stronger than their pride. The queen's council gathered in anger. One noble stepped forward, his voice shaking with fury. My queen, this creature defies your laws. If you choose him, you will lose your throne. Another shouted, he is a danger. Today he repairs, tomorrow he rules. The queen's tail lashed against the marble floor, silencing them in one crack of thunder. She rose from her throne, towering above all, her golden cloak blazing in the torchlight. Then let the galaxy watch. Let them see who truly rules, she roared. She turned her burning eyes on the human. You have shown skill. You have shown courage. You have shown truth. But know this, truth is a double-edged blade. If I keep you, I risk everything. If I end you, I waste what no empire can replace. The hall trembled with suspense. The human met her gaze without fear. I did not come here to be your weapon, he said quietly. But if my hands can repair what is broken, then use them. If my voice can speak what is true, then hear it. If my spirit can stand against the weight of your empire, then perhaps your empire was too heavy to begin with. The nobles gasped. The priests shouted in horror. The generals snarled in rage. No one had ever dared to speak to the queen like this, yet the queen laughed, a low, dangerous laugh that echoed like thunder rolling across the stars. Fragile one, she said. You remind me of something my people forgot long ago. Fear is easy. Pride is easier. But courage is rare. She raised her scepter high and the hall held its breath. Would she crush him at last? Would she raise him higher than any alien dared to stand? Then her voice cracked across the throne room like lightning. From this day forward, this human is my armorsmith, my engineer of war, and my protector of truth. His life is bound to mine. His skill is bound to the empire. And his defiance is bound to me alone. The throne room erupted in chaos. Nobles screamed. Priests fell to the ground. Generals pounded their fists in fury. But none dared challenge her. Her power was absolute, her choice final. The human bowed his head slightly, not in submission but in respect. And in that moment, the queen saw something terrifying. He was not afraid of her. He was not afraid of death. He was not afraid of the galaxy, and that made him unstoppable. Later, in the quiet of the night, the queen stood alone in her chamber, staring at her restored armor. She traced her claw along the reforged plates, feeling the strength in them. Her reflection glowed in the metal, but behind it she saw his shadow, the shadow of a human who had already changed the course of her empire. She whispered to herself, fragile in body, unbreakable in spirit. Her lips curled into a dangerous smile. The galaxy is not ready for you, and outside, beyond the palace walls, whispers spread across the stars. The story of a single human who stood tall before an alien queen. The story of a fragile engineer who defied death, defied pride, and defied an empire. The story that would burn across the galaxy. A story no one would ever forget. For the queen had made her choice, and that choice had changed everything.